Yeah, so I just watched Sick. It's a home invasion slasher. Kevin Williamson from Scream wrote it. I think if you don't know who he is, you should also know he wrote Dawson's Creek. But he is sort of an elder statesman of what slashers are today. I think he's been a part of every Scream project since then. Um, so this is sort of just a fun home invasion slasher with the context of COVID about it. Yeah, if you like slashers, if you like horror movies, if you like Blumhouse, this is going to definitely wet your whistle for sure. I feel some kind of way about the silliness of it that was, the COVIDness of it, but this movie was sort of based on the idea of the early days of COVID and the sort of the paranoia. So sure, I've been pretty vocal about how I don't know how I feel about a COVID movie as a premise to begin with, but if you're gonna do something silly and kind of cheesy and a little goofy, this is definitely a way to do it for sure. So as far as a home invasion, slasher movie, I really enjoyed it, and they got me thinking. I was always a big I was always a big fan of the Blumhouse look that they do. They have this really specific kind of look. I think it started originally in the older Blumhouse movies because they were one of the first studios that really shot everything digitally on Reds back in the day. And so Red cameras, especially in the dark, just had trouble because they weren't up to snuff the way we think of digital cameras, especially today. So you had to have some compromises. Let me pull up the scopes. I can sort of show you. But I want to try to do a color grade to my own stuff. Here's me making all sorts of unrelatable faces. I want to try to match some kind of color grade to the Blumhouse of it all, because I think this is a very good example of a Blumhouse looking movie. I know there's been other movies too, like all the Jordan Peele stuff and some other things that are not necessarily just straight horror the way Blumhouse does it, and sort of they did all those horror movies that were sort of period pieces. But I was always a big fan of their stuff where it's kids running around in the dark. I like that, and so it's a very specific kind of look. So if you look at this image, ignoring the suggested official trailers thing, because this was just a rip off of YouTube, or a pull off of YouTube, I guess. Very dark image, and you can look at that by looking at the scopes. So basically, this top line here should be absolute white, and there are a couple things. I believe this lamp is absolute white, but for the most part, almost everything is very close to zero, which is absolute black. And nothing is actually on zero, I don't think, but almost everything is in the bottom third or the bottom quarter. I've complained about this, or at least talked about this in the context of the Batman did this too. Blumhouse is doing it differently though. The Batman is doing it as like a inherited stylized choice that they're sort of like pushing. Blumhouse is just doing it to sort of tease out the sort of people in the creeping in the shadows of it all, which was a little bit of Batman, but I don't consider them the same thing. Anyway, the point is, like, news broadcast, a white person on a news broadcast, they're going to sit way up here near the 600s and 700s. I usually put myself at about 768 at the hottest point, because I'm very white. But yeah, nothing in this image other than this street lamp here and a couple practicals get even close to that. Almost everything is down at the bottom. I've complained about this in the context of like digital compression for like YouTube and Netflix, because the way they compress stuff, dark stuff gets lost in the digital compression. This is no exception. If you zoom into this, it looks god awful, and the fact that I screen recorded it makes it look even worse. But just all the blockiness, it is what it is. I do like the look though, because it's a very sharp look, and it's sort of like leaning into the fact that the cameras, at least at the time, couldn't really handle dark stuff, so things were actually sort of even darker than you'd think. So even this scene, which is an interior sort of daytime scene, it's very bright outside, and so you have a little bit of that. I think this is what this spike is over here. That's way super hot, but their skin tones are not even close to that. I think she's coming in, low 640s. Maybe she even be down here, so in the quarter. So it's very dark. So like if you actually use your I walk into human worlds kind of brain, they're so much darker than they would be in real life. That's one of the things. This not so much. This action actually I can actually more or less buy, because they're in a car. They're sort of in shadow, so I can buy them sort of being the exposure that they are. But in other cases, like even this tracking shot, the stuff that's in the dark is really dark. So stuff that's bright still remains bright, but stuff that's dark gets extra dark. I can show you that, how I do that in a minute. And then there's, you know, warm, sunny stuff. What was that, like Pleasure Island or whatever that one movie was a lot of this, where they're hanging out in the sunlight, and it's beautiful. Is there another shot of them on the beach? I don't know. Let me try to find it. Yeah, so like right here. So yeah, they're super hot. This is actually like I think it's a very beautiful shot because it's very saturated. It looks like a commercial shot, but then you go back into the dark, and ignoring the fact that it's kind of green, it's all over the place. It's kind of a mess. So, but I like it. It's sort of a crispy dark, and you're sort of embracing the darkness of it. And what's crazy is, if you really just think about practically how bright this room is, it's much brighter. So like we can go into the color grade. And for instance, this shot, what we could do is we could just boost the exposure. I'm in high dynamic range. Let's see if we can make this bigger, because this is going to be hard to see otherwise. There we go. So I'm in the HDR palette, just changing exposure. You can do it at a bunch of different spots, but if you look at the graph, it's way down at the bottom. So to my eye, how this actually was shot, the exposure was probably, let's see if we can get there. It's going to break the image because it's not a strong image, just because I pulled off of YouTube, but I'd say probably that. So her skin tone is still below a third, but she has a pretty dark skin tone, all things considered. But yeah, I'd say something like that is probably how they shot it, and then that's how they actually mastered it when they put it out. Very, very friendly for theaters. A lot more frustrating for streaming, unless you have fancy monitors and really good internet. But it is what it is. Some other shots though, like this shot, for instance, it seems dark, and it is. It's incredibly dark. Look how crushed everything is down in the bottom. But if you look at how bright everything is, you can sort of see detail. And so again, just to my eye, how they probably shot it, probably something like that, maybe a little darker. And part of what they're doing is they're doing this thing where they're pushing contrast in different directions. So usually, let me try to explain it. This is going to be a mess if I try to explain it, but here we go. So usually your shot is something like that. And so what they'll do, maybe we'll go even brighter. So what they'll do to fix that is they'll go in and they'll take the lower part of the image, the shadows or the midtones, and they'll crush them down. Actually, we'll do midtones because this wants to kill itself. Oh, I'm doing log, that's why. Ignore that. Here we go. We'll do lift. We'll crush things down, and then we'll push things that are bright a little bit brighter to make it even more ridiculous. It's the same thing as doing a contrast adjustment, but it's just a little bit more ridiculous. You can use the contrast, and then you just make sure the pivot goes down, and so that when things are dark, they're really dark, and when things are bright, they're really bright. So something like that. So it's not a perfect science. That's just my theory on how they do it. Honestly, it's not far. I could have just gone farther, apparently. It's an interesting look. I really like the look. It's not for everything. It's definitely not for, commercial stuff. It's not for corporate stuff. It's not for comedies for the most part, although Donald Glover might disagree with you. But even these interior scenes, they look like they're regular exposed because your eyes get used to it. But then when you actually pull up the scopes, they're super crushed. Again, on the day, how it was shot based on how bright these lights are, just because you got detail, you got exposure, and she's a dark-skinned woman. She's going to be like almost probably the exposure of these walls behind her. But on the day, it was probably something closer to that, and then in post, or maybe a show LUT or something, or I guess a film LUT, they would bring it down. They would add some contrast, but they would also bring stuff down. So not a perfect one on that one. I can already tell. But not all that different, So it's a cool look. It's a fun look. I enjoy it. Let me see if there's any other shots I want to address while I'm still clicking around. And nighttime. I think the sort of the red camera Blumhouse look that really makes me want to be part of this whole business of show is this kind of stuff where. Again, the way it was shot on the day, based on how bright this is, there's probably just a scissor lift or something, or a crane with a big bright light right here, shining down to the road. Maybe they wet the road. I don't think they did, though, because that would have made it brighter, because it's more reflective. But on the day, it was probably something like this, and then, you know, they went in and boosted some contrast, moved the pivot around, and brought things down, you know? So it's very interesting. It's a whole thing. It's the whole being able to see into the dark patches kind of stuff, which again is awesome in a dark movie theater where you can have access to all that detail. A little more frustrating when you're, you know, a person living in the world and you're having to watch it on a TV in a sunny room. Just saying. Yeah, so all that, now that I've said the speech on speech, let me try to color grade to some of this. So I think what I want to do, since I'm doing interior shots, we'll grab this one. Let's grab this one too. And maybe we'll grab this one, but I need to fix this. Hold on. Let me just turn off the grade. You know, let me start over, because I don't know which ones of these I messed with. So we'll do this one, this one, the grade is off, and anything else here that I can really use. Maybe this, just for the sake of it, but I'm not even sure I consider this a good still. And the reason I am saying that, I know that's pretty ridiculous of me, is this scene happens late. She's hiding from the bad guys, or bad guy, depending on how you decide how you want to watch this movie. Yeah, she's in like a shed. There's a crazy amount of light on her, and because of how things are set up, even though she's on a third line, this bad guy's on a third line, moving, I think, right to left. Because this person is so small and there's so many more bright things around them, they're hard to see. So on a big screen, probably wouldn't be a big deal because you sort of got that perspective. But on, you know, the TV that I was watching, I basically missed this person going by. But again, if you want to, you know, my best guess of how it was shot on the day based on how bright the shadows are in that room, it was probably something like that where you can actually see the guy, because now you can actually see the guy. And then obviously we just need to fix the tint. I mean, even white balance is pretty nice. Isn't that wild? Just little things make these really aggressive grades. It's the whole thing. Anyway, so yeah, let's try to color me. How about good old toothy matte? So we got three choices here. We got toothy matte with the light on me is the same color as the practicals, and everything is white balanced wrong, so it's all orange. And we can fix that in one step right here. We'll just do the grandfather clock. There you go. It's not perfect. Look at that hand. That looks gross, but it's basically what it is. If we want to be more accurate, we could probably do this. We got me with daylight on my face and orange practicals, and we got me with just daylight on my face with the sunlight. It's not actually sunlight, but you know, it is what it is. So let's look at the gallery. And I think I want to first try this guy with this guy, because I think this is honestly inspired by this look. If I had to be honest with myself. So let's look at this thing. There's a practical layer. Okay, so let's invert this wipe. You know what? I'm not even gonna hold on. I gotta put it somewhere, don't I? Cool. Okay, so that's a good starting point. So we'll just put that down in its corner for a minute. So let's try to match that guy to that guy. We'll do selected album, selected clips. Okay, cool. So few things we got to do here, and this is just because this was black magic. That's what it looked like coming out of camera, and then these are just. This is a color space transform to get into Davinci wide gamut, because that's what I like to work in. And this is the Rec 709 conversion. So this is basically the same thing as a LUT, but it's a little bit different how they do it. And then this is just the exposure change, because again, TV personality guy likes to be bright. So I'm sort of touching 768. Yeah, so yeah. Can we get down into this world here? I think we can. I think we can do it in 3 nodes. Let's see if we can do it. We know this practical looks basically the same. The exposure on this is, okay, so let's pop this back up. So all this bright stuff is me, all this dark stuff is them. So we're gonna definitely need to do an exposure change, and then I think we'll just probably do a little bit of a teal orange look. Seems to be the vibe that they're going after. So let's call this exposure. And let's just go for it. I'm just gonna do HDR and just do the exposure just to see where we end up. Oh, I like that very much. So, oh, there we go. Okay. His practicals seem brighter than mine, and we can fix that with, we'll just do it in the same node even. We'll do it in log, and we'll just grab the practicals now. I don't know if we can grab the practicals without grabbing me, but we can try. So we'll just drop the upper range until we see something. Can't really do it, so it's gonna have to stay, which is not bad. I think his practicals are basically at the same level. That's pretty close already, right? I mean, that's not, I ain't mad at that. I'll ignore that. So that's the first thing, and that's really, man, that's so dark. But it's true. It is what it is. So that's where we came from. That's where we're going. That's why it looks great in a movie theater, because once your eyes get used to it, it's great, because you know, most movies or most TV shows like to keep you in this world to try to keep you in sort of a safe world, but you know, this is the unsafe world. Yeah, moving on. Let's just do a teal orange. I like to do it in log, so we'll push some teal into the low lights, because if you look, nothing is actually black, really. I think it's green. We can look at the vector scope. So if we destroy the saturation on mine, that's how much saturation is in this image. So I just need to go down just a little bit. So we need to basically lose a little bit of saturation and then lose a little bit of, I don't know what I'm saying. Here we go. So teal orange, let's just go green just a little bit. Oh, it's too far. I don't know why this is so aggressive. Why are you so, I can change the gamma to linear, and that'll make it a little bit less aggressive, or not. Oh, it's because I'm not in log. Come on, Matt, get your S in the game. Okay, here we go. So it's just a little bit. Let's see if I can get it into something like that. And then we need to fix the highlights, which will be a exposure thing. Let's put a little bit of yellow back into, we'll just do this. Oh, interesting. Okay. And then we need to lose the saturation. We'll just call this. I think I can just get rid of it through color boost. That will probably do it. Because the way our eyes see, there's basically less saturation the darker it gets, and then at the brightest parts, saturation goes away too. So saturation only really exists in the middle. That's pretty close. I think I need to go green a little bit. So in the teal orange look, I need to push green. I'm just gonna push it in the tint. Oh, there we go. And maybe, I don't know, I think that's pretty close. Maybe add a little bit of green in the shadows and take a little bit of green out here. And we need to lower I can already tell this yellow's too hot, so we can go to hue versus sat. We'll just grab yellow, we'll just bring it down. Something like that. You know, I don't hate it. I think I might need to have taken down too much yellow. And then maybe push a little bit of the red. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect 1-to-1. I feel like I'm a little too contrasty actually, so we can change the exposure a little bit, drop the contrast a little bit. Nah, I don't like that. How can we do this? We can do this in the mid-tone. Actually, let's lift the shadows. That's what we'll do. Yeah, I mean, maybe actually pump some contrast back in. I don't hate that. Yeah, so I don't know what you guys think. Should I keep going? Is it worth doing another one? That's basically the same look, isn't it? She and I have different skin tones. I know that's not cool to say, but it is what it is. Her too, yeah. I mean, I think that's the most efficient way to do it, and here's why I think that. I think part of why the Blumhouse look looks the way it does is most of the time everything is under daylight balance, and so like this is probably a daylight light. These hot lights are not daylight; they're just blown out, so they're losing saturation as they get high, which is really cool. But it's the experience of the area that they're in being daylight and then the practicals being amber, which is a cool look. And I wouldn't say Blumhouse pioneered it, but they definitely participated in the conversation for sure. And again, I don't think it's much of a coincidence that I lean towards that look these days now too. There's something to be said for having everything matching color temperature. So everything in this room is lit the same way, same color. And same with this, even though obviously what a bad job on white balancing. Yeah, and so like for instance, if this shot was actually shot, or if this shot was actually done where it's the camera's daylight balanced, but the light itself is all tungsten, this is what you would have. You would have that. That's what it would look like. Obviously this is brighter, but so I think these clips could all exist in the same world. Obviously I have a sort of a white wall where they have these beautiful sort of like, log cabin walls plus the stone backing. But yeah, I'm into it. So what do you guys think? Did I crack the code, or am I just a poser posing my way through life? Like, share, subscribe, go see the movie if you want. It's called Sick. It's COVID stuff was what it was, but otherwise it's a very serviceable slasher from a production house and a filmmaker that I consider to be pretty legit. So yeah, catch you next time.